Warning, this video contains flashing images which may not be suitable for people with photosensitive epilepsy. Viewer discretion is advised. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Today I have a build guide for you for my Uber boss killer that I made in Necropolis League. This is using the skill Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping, and there are lots of really flashy things in this game, but I have never seen anything more egregious as what becomes of this Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping. This is not the best mapper, this is not the best boss killer, but I wanted to share what I created with you all and how I made this build function. The reason this build exists is because I was double corrupting 6-link Diala's Malefaction chests. I hit +2 socketed duration gems and socketed AoE gems. I went looking for gems that met those two tags, came across a Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping, thought, oh, that should be fun. So we ended up going with this, and here it is. I'm just gonna throw 3 of them on the ground here, and they explode, and they're going to zap around other areas like a normal Lightning Spire Trap, but I can use them as like normal traps that all will go off when you throw them. The difference with this gem is that it doesn't have the cooldown. It just works like a normal trap skill, and then it has the duration tag, so increasing duration of it will causes more strikes to happen with the skill. Now, I'm going to throw in a Drox map here to show you what's going on with it. This is also a bright map, so it's definitely not going to be as bad here as in other places. The darker the area, the crazier all of the flashing from this gets. And this is also the base skill effect for Lightning Spire Trap. There is an MTX for it that turns it into red, but I wanted to show you what it looks like in its base form before I switch it to make it look a little better. And these banners are kind of gnarly here. Got to delete those. So I haven't done anything crazy to boost my damage. And like I said, this is not the best mapper because every trap I throw has this stationary blasts to it. So it's not going to like go after enemies. If they get out of the AoE of it, they're just going to stop taking damage. And if a specific enemy needs to die, so the others need to take damage, then it might be a little tricky. But when it comes to bossing, it can definitely throw out the damage because I min-maxed it to a crazy degree. And as with a lot of things you will see from the Necropolis League, the gear on it is pretty insane. I mean, just the +4 Dialas itself is pretty insane. But it can definitely throw down some damage, but it'll also blind you. So now I'm going to switch this back to the Automaton Lightning Spire Trap effect because it's already messing with me. Like, I did not even half of a map, and it's just ridiculous. But the red is definitely not as flashy, but still, it gets to be a lot. Doing Delve with this without the MTX was one of the worst visual experiences I think I've had playing PoE in the 10-year plus history of this. At this point, it's pretty insane that you can do this. But since it has enough damage to like take down an Uber, of course it'll eventually make it through the map. But it just doesn't have the greatest clear and coverage. But I think that kind of is something that a lot of more strictly boss killing builds kind of suffer from. But it plays just about like any other trap build that you need lots of traps to trigger to get a lot of stuff happening. So in addition to the Lightning Spire traps, I have an Orb of Storms, I have an Arcanist brand that casts Wave of Conviction and Elemental Weakness and Conductivity. So there's 2 curses there, plus the Wave of Conviction for exposure. use that to boost a lot of damage. I also have a Divine Blessing Zealotry. Divine Blessing is being removed. You're only going to be able to get that gem through a pair of boots in the upcoming league. And here we've got the boss here, and I'll just throw traps at it, and there it's dead. Then for Drox, throw down as many traps as I can, hit the Zealotry, make sure the Arcanist brand's down, hit all my Flasks, and don't die to banners. Keep throwing traps, and he's in his less damage phase, and then Drox dead. So single target, you can actually stack a lot of these up and get a lot of damage output for it. And since that was the case, I ended up being able to take down some Ubers with this. Not all of them, because I'm not particularly good at the bossing aspect of this game, mechanics-wise. But I was able to get a few Mavens down. I got one of the 3 Exarchs, and I got a few Eaters. I did Shapers, and I will do an Uber Eater at the end of this video. So I think I've given you sufficient warning that this is not the greatest build, but nonetheless, I will explain what I have going on here and how it works. So the original idea with the Dialas, I was looking at all these gems. I was originally thinking with the quality on Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping for chance to trigger an additional time, I would want to pair that with a green socket in this Dialas Malefaction to raise the quality on it up higher for traps to trigger an additional time. So what this chance for trap to trigger additional time means is that when I throw a bunch of these traps, they're all going to go off at the exact same time because I'm a Saboteur, but then there's going to be additional ones after the fact. These ones triggered and again. So once they trigger, the trap can rearm itself and then use itself again afterwards, a short duration there. But you're still at the limit of number of traps you can have down. So if I'm constantly throwing traps, those additional trap spawns will, like there were 12 there that lasted again. So if you have enough trap throwing speed to throw down enough traps that you're deleting old traps, this quality and chance for traps to trigger an additional time does not do much for you. So I eventually switched it to a red socket to get 2 additional levels out of the Dialas, 4 extra damage, and we end up getting this Lightning Spire Trap up to level 34 with the level 4 in power and other sources of additional gem levels. Then on that note of gem levels, I will mention that in this patch, Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping now has an effectiveness of 80 at gem level 1, and that scales up to 100 at gem level 20. Previously 100 at all gem levels. What that should mean is that pushing this Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping up to level 34, like I've done, will give it an extra 14% of effectiveness of added damage. So there will be a slight buff to this skill by increasing its level higher and higher, but otherwise not much is changing with this in the Settlers of Kalgur patch. The next big thing to make this work is the Slave Driver's Hand Ambush Mitts. This is an incursion unique that requires upgrading, but then causes increases in reduction to cast speed to also apply to trap throwing speed, and gives you trap AoE and chance to gain Endurance Frenzy or power charges when any of your traps are triggered by an enemy. This also causes your skill switch throw traps to cost life instead of mana. So I spend life to throw all these traps, and since I have so much trap throw speed, cast speed, whatever, I don't have to worry about my mana. The only time I'm using mana is for the other skills, and that is being done through Eldritch Battery so that I can get an extra aura with Zealotry. So going through the rest of the gear here, I will again remind you that this was created in Necropolis League. We had access to craft insane gear through the graveyard mechanic from that league. Thus, I have this wand. This wand did not hit +1 lightning spell skill gems. It has cold, but it still has the spell damage, flat lightning, crit chance for spells, crit multi, cast speed. All those things I needed. And then I'm getting extra elemental damage on the quality I added with an enchant. My helmet has life regen, cold and lightning res, as well as physical damage from hits taken as fire damage. This veiled crafting mod is being done away with in the coming Settlers of Kalgur League, and I'm not sure about the implicits from the Eldritch currency, though I also have Fizz taken as fire here, as well as increased conductivity curse effect. So it might be much harder going forward to get physical damage taken as elemental, which was the primary source of physical damage mitigation for a lot of evasion builds, especially in the top right of the tree. My shield has life, hybrid life, +1 lightning skill gems, life regen, lightning res, and crit chance for spells. Amulet, also insane. It's got +1 lightning gems, life, crit chance, multi, spell damage, cast speed, which cast speed is trap throwing speed because of the gloves, boosting up the strength and int there because I am short on strength. I use the catalysts to give myself an extra 4 strength off of this, and then allocate prismatic skin for +2 all max res. The rings are very similar. I've got life, cast speed, fire damage doesn't help, but I hit chaos res here. There's rarity. I threw some extra damage on it. Nothing super spectacular there, but lots of chaos res for me. And the other ring as well has life, rarity. This one hit the fire res. I was trying to get crafting this ring in the graveyard, but it gave me fire damage on this one. This one gave me the fire res. Also chaos res and some extra added damage. Boots, life regen, fire cold res, lots of movement speed, extra life regeneration, and I drop brittle ground while moving. So this will give me extra base crit on enemies that are in this brittle ground. And then this belt I swapped around across a couple characters in Necropolis League because it has the triple T1 Ellie res with the T1 life, and the elemental damage with attacks doesn't really help me here, but I use this belt on multiple builds, so I didn't want to change it really. Now, as the upcoming Settlers of Kalgur League is a heavily melee focused league, there's not much changing to this build or the gems or anything, but the links I've got here is a lightning spire trap of zapping in a red socket in the Dialas for +2 to level. Then I have a level 4 empower also in a red socket, giving it as well 2 additional levels, which in turn gives an additional 2 levels to the lightning spire trap. So that is the source of 5 gem levels on the lightning spire trap. Then I have awakened elemental focus. This gives +1 level of supported elemental skill gems, but causes the lightning spire trap of zapping not to be able to inflict shock. I'm instead inflicting shock with the orb of storms. Also here, I have cluster trap support. Lets me throw 2 additional traps at a time, so that's how I throw 3, and they kind of target close to where I am targeting. And this also causes trap skills to do less damage, and then I am also putting this in a red socket along with the awakened Ellie focus, so that they are gaining additional levels, because as this levels up, the less damage mod goes down. Next, I have increased duration, which in the upcoming patch is being changed to more duration, as well as its quality also giving more skill effect duration. So a slight change here, but I'm using this in a green socket in the Dialas, so it gets 32 additional quality, thus giving it an extra 15% skill effect duration here. This actually wound up being a big damage increase for Lightning Spire Trap of Zapping, because the base duration on this is 1.0 seconds, and it strikes every 0.4 seconds. So by increasing the duration to these every 0.4 second thresholds, you increase the number of zaps the traps are able to get down. So after all of the duration I've added to the Lightning Spire traps, it is up to 2.8 seconds, which means it will zap 7 times while it is going off. Actually, it zaps 8 times because it's like starts at 0 with a zap. If I remove the increased duration, it drops to 1.8 seconds, meaning this gives it an additional 2 zaps. So for scaling maximum amount of damage, increased duration's absolutely the go-to here. Then I have charge traps. This lets me gain power and frenzy charges when my traps are triggered, and gives extra crit multi per power charge and trap throwing speed per frenzy charge. So then I don't have to worry about charge generation there. I don't have to rely on these gloves for it. When enemies are triggering the traps, I will just gain all of those charges. And this is in a green socket because this one wasn't going to gain much by being in a red socket, and I originally had this kind of swapped so that I was trying to use the traps trigger an additional time, but it didn't work how I wanted it to there. So then to the Orb of Storms. I have this linked with Awakened Unbound Ailments, Overcharge, and Awakened added lightning damage. That's going to give it an extra level and extra flat damage. The quality on both the Awakened Unbound Ailments and Overcharge both give increased shock duration, which I did not really need for this because it'll just keep zapping, especially if there's enemies inside its radius. But Overcharge causes it to deal less damage, but it shocks enemies as though dealing 690% more damage. So I'm able to get bigger shocks off by using Overcharge, the Unbound Ailments for non-damaging ailment effect, and then the added lightning to give it more of a punch to get the shocks out. So that is a better source of shock for me. In my helmet is where I have my Arcanist brand linked to Wave of Conviction, Conductivity, and Elemental Weakness. And none of these gems needed quality either. Arcanist brand gives activation frequency. Once it gets all 3 of these things out, I don't need them to recast. That's just going to cost me more mana. The Wave of Conviction is just there to apply lightning exposure. The big thing you need with this is to ensure that the highest elemental damage coming out of Wave of Conviction is lightning damage, which I have achieved here with enough lightning scaling so that my low end on the lightning damage is higher than the top end of the fire damage. So that would guarantee that every time it hits, it will always inflict lightning exposure for minus 15 elemental resistance. Then conductivity, minus 38 lightning resistance, and elemental weakness with a minus 30 elemental resistance. And I get the increased conductivity curse effect. Both of these also increase duration of elemental ailments and shock, so I didn't quality them up. In my boots, I have Summoned Skitterbots, Wrath, and Grace linked with a level 4 Enlighten so that I can reserve them all nicely on the mana. In my wand, I have Zealotry linked to Divine Blessing and Inspiration. This allows me just to be able to use the additional aura by spending a bunch of my energy shield. Now, I did not level the Divine Blessing up too high because I didn't have a ton of energy shield to work with here, as I really kind of built around evasion on this character. So every time this gem levels, it increases the base cost as well. So Zealotry is a 50% reservation aura. 50% of my mana is 380, Then you would take the mana reservation efficiency out of that and then add an additional 128 cost to it. So this ends up costing me 357 mana, and I have 518 energy shield, so I didn't want to raise that too high because I still need that energy shield to cast other skills like my shield charge, frost blink, Arcanist brand, as well as all of the curses and wave of conviction that it casts. All of that's going to come from my energy shield there as well. But then divine blessing support has been removed in the 3.25 expansion, and March of the Legion is a pair of boots that would be the only way to gain that support gem. So likely this won't be able to use Zealotry in the future without those boots, and these boots give a level 25 divine blessing, so that's going to add a lot of that flat mana cost to the gem. So working it in like I have here is just not going to happen in the future. You'd have to do something else with these gem sockets. And the last gems, I got Shield Charge linked with Culling Strike and Frost Blink. Shield Charge isn't leveled all the way up, that's why I needed the Strength to level that up higher. The higher you get that leveled, the better it scales with your movement speed, and it just works better. And then the Culling Strike can come in handy, especially with the Frost Blink, because if enemies die in over here, I can just jump in and it will die. And that, I believe, covers all of the gems and gear. Flasks. I have reduced charges used on the Eternal Life Flask with Corrupting Blood removal. Reduced charges used here allows me to use this flask 4 times and gain the uses back way faster. I have a diamond flask with reduced charges used and giving me extra crit chance on top of the diamond flask. I have a quartz flask that gives cast speed. Getting extra cast speed will give me extra trap throwing speed from the gloves. So there actually is benefit there. Then the Bottled Faith creates a big consecrated ground AoE. Enemies in that take increased damage and gives me a big boost to crit chance there as well. And then a Quicksilver Flask with a big reduction of the effect of curses on me during its effect. So next we'll jump into the passive tree and ascendancy. So for a trap build, Saboteur doesn't really provide anything super crazy outside of Pyromaniac. You can do potentially more with traps with other ascendancies, but Pyromaniac gives you this immune to ignite and shock, as well as 2% life regen for each trap triggered recently, up to 10% life regen here. This is pretty insane amount of life regen, especially when I only need 5 traps to trigger and I can throw down 29 of them at a time. I'm constantly going to have that crazy regen up, so that's really nice. Chain reaction gives increased area of effect to your traps, so this is causing them to zap in larger regions, and when your traps trigger, nearby traps also trigger. So that is how I'm getting all of these to just like pop all at once. I get all that damage output just right there. And surely the extra AoE is nice to increase the zaps here, but you can't really see the full AoE of these zaps, like where they're hitting their targets, which is much easier to see with the normal skill MTX here. You can see the bigger circles. That's the area that it's actually hitting in with these zaps, but without the MTX, this just will blind you like in every situation. So you kind of just have to trust that it's actually hitting big AoE there. Also here I have Explosives Expert, giving me crit multi against burning enemies, crit chance against shocked enemies, and Ellie Pin against chilled enemies. Now because I am using Summon Skitterbots, I am constantly shocking and chilling enemies, and I missed my Abyss Jewel here that has flat fire damage on it. That was a big deal. That gives me the ignites on crits, but not with the Lightning Spire trap because of the elemental focus. It comes from the Orb of Storms doing that little bit of fire damage to get a small ignite off on the enemy so that the Lightning Spire trap of Zapping can get that 40 crit multi. And then lastly, I have Born in the Shadows, so I cannot be blinded. I would take reduced damage from blinded enemies. Nearby enemies are blinded, and I blind on hit. For maximum damage output, you could go with Bomb Specialist. As this is an AoE skill, there's a 20% chance to deal 50% more area damage. This amounts to about 10% more damage. It's not super huge, but it is an option here as well. Then for the passive tree, I needed access to this bottom side more than I needed access up here, so I didn't go through this elemental damage and get the crit chance and stuff here. I came down through the bottom, and getting coordination gets me that cast speed to help with the trap throwing speed. And I push down here for charisma and give non-curse aura skills 50% increased duration. This increases the duration and uptime on zealotry from the divine blessing, but in the future maybe you wouldn't have that on a build like this. But getting this mana reservation efficiency is really good. I could probably get away with a level 3 Enlighten here with where my mana is currently at, because Charisma is really strong with its mana reservation efficiency. Pushing to the left, I grab a Jewel Socket. This has trap damage, life, and crit multi with elemental skills. Nothing amazing. I did this in a private league, so I didn't have access to trade for jewels. Kind of had to make do with what I could get, and this one was pretty solid. Then I'm grabbing Master Sapper. This gives 2 additional traps, can be placed at a time, additional chance to gain frenzy charges, trap damage, but gets me a trap mastery so that I can have additional 5 traps placed at a time. That pushes me up from a cap of 24 to 29 that I can have down here all at once. Then pathing through reflexes, I get spell suppression here. I come down here, get some life and profane chemistry, Mage Bane for some spell suppression from my dexterity evasion bonus, but most importantly is exceptional performance for the increased skill effect duration and the mastery for more skill effect duration, trying to push that 1 second duration on the Lightning Spire trap as high as possible, and I managed to get it into this threshold that it does 7 zaps. Then pushing to the right from this little crossroads, Revenge of the Hunted gives spell suppression while on full life, some life and evasion. Grab the strength because I really needed that. Push down here for more spell suppression, preventing an additional bit of suppressed spell damage because going into Uber bosses, that spell damage gets pretty gnarly. So I've got spell suppression capped up, and I take only 44% of that damage. Next, I have my Watcher's Eye that I'm using for this. Again, private league, I didn't have the greatest source of a good Watcher's Eye on this. This is only giving me 77% crit chance. I'm not using determination. I just never happened upon one that was like ideal for this build, so that could definitely be improved here. Then I get a frenzy charge, which is good. That gives me extra trap throwing speed from the charge trap support. Then I'm grabbing more life. Mastery here, you count as on full life while at 90% of maximum life or above. That is because I'm using Revenge of the Hunted. I want to make sure I'm within that top 90% instead of full life because I'm spending life to throw my traps. I want to have a little buffer there to keep this 10% spell suppression. This mastery will allow that for me. Then Intuition gives life, spell suppression, and evasion, movement speed, spell suppression up into Quick Step. Then moving on up. Blood Drinker, 2% life recovery on kill, and then increased max life if there's no life mods on my body armor, which there is not on a Dialis Malefaction, so that's a nice boost to life there. Next Jewel Socket is a Thread of Hope with a large ring, and this is really what allowed all this to come together. This node here, Hunter's Gambit, gives increased damage over time with bow skills, chaos damage over time multiplier, but 10% increased skill effect duration. Entropy gives damage over time and 10% increased skill effect duration. Without these nodes, you see my trap duration dropped below that 2.8, which was a 0.4 second threshold. So you got 0.4, 0.8, 1.2, 1.6, 2.0, 2.4, and then 2.8 is the next threshold for that next zap. Getting these two nodes pushes me into that next threshold to get an additional zap out of the Lightning Spire trap of zapping. So these nodes were very good. I'm also grabbing Blood Siphon for more life, and the 20 strength there is very valuable. This also hits Saboteur for 30% trap damage and 2 additional traps placed at a time. I'm also getting 25% crit chance and crit multi here. It can't quite hit Expeditious Munitions there. I could get a 1% regen from Growth and Decay, which is certainly nice. You can get chance for traps to trigger an additional time, but that doesn't work super well with enough trap throwing speed. Then you could even cause a marked enemy to take increased damage, get extra flask effect. This jewel hits a lot of cool stuff potentially for this build, but I am grabbing 5 different notable passives with this Thread of Hope. Then also getting another Frenzy and Power Charge here. Then this next trap set of nodes, I am getting the crit chance and multi with traps to get high explosives. This also increases my chance to gain power charges, as well as crit chance and multi with traps. But I needed a second mastery here, and I'm getting 5% chance to throw up to 4 additional traps. So with the cluster trap, I throw 3. Sometimes I can get lucky and throw 7, even though it's only a 5% chance, but it can increase my damage output against the boss where I'm just spamming these traps down. Continuing on up, Written in Blood, 10 strength, more life. I didn't grab these trap nodes, which gives an additional cooldown use, which you would normally use for a normal Lightning Spire trap that has its cooldown, but this doesn't have the cooldown. It's a normal trap. I get the Whispers of Doom for the additional curse, so that I can get both the conductivity and the elemental weakness on the Arcanist brand. We're getting more aura effect here and reservation efficiency from influence, and then getting extra effect of auras on me, so this extra spell damage from Wrath and the spell damage from Zealotry gets buffed. Then I have High Voltage, giving increased crit chance against shocked enemies, more crit multi there as well. I have Eldritch Battery, allowing me to not have to worry about the mana reservation, and I could use the Divine Blessing, and I don't have to worry about the mana cost of the curses, because that gets costly with these. Elemental weakness is 33 mana, conductivity is 52 mana, and when they're on an Arcanist brand, they're going to continually cast even if the curse is already on the enemy until the Arcanist brand has expired. But I'm also increasing my skill effect duration to a crazy degree, but that's another reason I did not quality the Arcanist brand to lower the activation frequency so it doesn't spam those curses down as much. Then into Static Blows, increased effect of lightning ailments, and increased damage if you've shocked an enemy recently here. This betters the effect of the shock I'm getting out of the Orb of Storms. And then to the Lightning Wheel here, I go up for Heart of Thunder for Lightning Pin, and this is all lightning damage. And then the right side is Chance to Shock and increased effect of lightning ailments, more lightning damage. And then I'm getting an additional 15% to max effect of shock with the mastery. Grab another power charge with the spell damage per power charge here, and then another jewel socket that is giving double crit multi. It's really the only thing that I'm getting there. Now this is a chance to hinder enemies on hit with spells. I was playing multiple different builds on this class, and I wound up not needing that for this build, but if I wanted to grab more life, like that is there. Hindering enemies is also nice because it will slow their movement speed, causing them to stay in the Lightning Spire traps of zapping or longer. So that is an option if you have extra intelligence on the tree and you have the tattoos. That is there. And there we go. Now let's see if I can handle an Uber Eater. I gotta remember how to do this. Got the shield charge and the frost blink. I just gotta not get hit pretty much. I don't have the greatest amount of life, but the damage is pretty solid. Pulling up the POB here, says this is about 10.4 million DPS. And against an Uber, it drops it to like 3. So there's definitely better builds out there, but should you want to replicate this, you have the blueprint of what I was able to do with it. And the damage potential is definitely here. It just takes a lot to really get it pumping. I don't know how you would really pull this off without pushing the gym level up to like 30 something. There definitely are better bossing builds, but as for me, this is the best performing Uber boss killer I've ever made, and killed more Uber bosses with this build than I have in the rest of the PoE history. Uber bosses are something I have struggled with, but let's go. Move. I got the Arcanist brand down, getting blinds out, I got the spell suppression, and just keep throwing down this damage. And the boss is taking damage, and I got hit. You get hit, and you'll still die. Because there just wasn't enough potential to get survivability and make this skill deal damage on this build. Oh, hunger. So massive in this fight. Inescapable doom. This is the scariest part of this fight, because these tentacles that do so much damage. Okay, dodge them, make sure they get pulled in. Hunger, run. A lot of this is just like mechanics you gotta know. And I didn't get the blink off fast enough. I tried. Okay. Writhing Mass, this is where I can get my damage in. And I gotta move. Succumb, blink. Timing's a bit off because I've been playing so much Elden Ring and hunger. Alright, Zealotry. Oh, Inescapable Doom. Okay, made it through there. Oh. Succumb, blink. Gotta get behind that. Now, luckily I have a lot of evasion to deal with those slaps. Oh. Blink. Hunger, run away. Hunger again, run away. Writhing Mass, apply all the things, and blast. Another Inescapable Doom. Here we go, there's one. Grabbed that one. Gotta wait. I'm gonna die. Yep. But if you're good at the mechanics of this boss fight, this build can definitely do it, but I am not. But this build got me my first ever kill of this boss. So you know what? I'm happy with it. And there's an Ashes of the Stars. Yay! Uber viable build. Yeah? Yeah? Hahaha. Alright, so last things here. The MTX I'm using on this abomination of a build. I kind of used the Diala's Malefaction as a base for it, so I went with the Ultimatum Helmet and Arch Nemesis Wings. Threw on some Assassin's Boots, Infernal Gloves. Didn't go too much with it. I like the simpler MTX looks on characters in most cases, so that's what I've got going on here. But that is this build. Should you want to play it? But that's going to do it for this video. I'd like to thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the like button, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Subscribe to make sure you don't miss more videos from me. If you'd like to help support my channel, please consider using the super thanks, the heart icon just below the video, or by joining to become a member, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.